The region of Eastern Europe is fascinating to so many people around the world, but especially in the United States, the picture of this region is distorted by media portrayals of corruption and gangsterism and endless poverty, as though the 1990s simply never left. The reality is that this is a region which over the last 3 decades has strived to shake off those images. Now, somebody has decided to tell those stories. Each week, the Visegrad Dispatch podcast seeks to share stories from the region, whether it's business, culture, politics, current events. You'll find it and so much more on Spotify. Now back to your regularly scheduled Christops.
Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. Now, this episode was supposed to be released and recorded before the yesterday's one, but I had to do that one quite in a hurry, because, oh boy, that was an important one. If you've missed that one, please go and check that one out, though. But today we're focusing on, well, two things, Igor Girkin and economy. Haven't figured out the title of this mess while I'm still recording this one. However, let me tell you, comrades, the air in the Telegram echo chamber, well, now, that's thick enough to choke a goat. It smells of fear, cheap instant coffee, the Indian kind. If you're in Latvia, you know what I mean. And the cloying, inescapable stench of failure. They call it special military operation, but out here in the digital trenches, where my personal war is fought, it looks more like a slow-motion catastrophe orchestrated by half-wits and professional sloths. And this is where Igor Girkin, yes, our favorite retired colonel and prophet of doom, drops a truth bomb so filthy it should require hazmat gear. He looks at the leadership and sees, well, like we all do, a radioactive, intellectually bankrupt amphibian clinging to the bottom of a boiling saucepan. The sacred frog is less political mollusk, more existential burden. And its fate? Short and unpleasant. Fasten your seatbelts, comrades, because the apocalypse is being narrated by a profoundly depressed historian. Let's hear Strelkov, Girkin, on the short selling of Russia's collective destiny. Quote, Igor Girkin, the fate of Russia can be very different, including very short. Dear Frol Sergeyevich, regarding your letter of 25th of October, thank you for your latest summary. The situation is still, slowly but surely, heating up. But on the sacred frog, albeit one grieved by the uncomfortable state of the environment, it still only acts as a stimulus to cling even tighter to the bottom and walls of the saucepan. Unfortunately, our amphibian has never shone with breadth and depth of intellect, and over the years it has squandered in pleasures even the baggage it originally possessed. The same applies to its willpower, which has atrophied to the state of a, and this is a brilliant quote, mid-level Jew on the way to Babi Yar. No, of course, the amphibian can dress up in some semblance of military uniform and, very carefully, threaten its partners with the still-preserved missile and nuclear club, but none of the partners are afraid of it from the word all. However, I have written about this more than once or twice. It is also quite amusing to observe the snake biting its own tail by relatively massively imprisoning middle management officials, apparently in the hope that the next ones won't steal and those higher up, i.e. those who stand in a tight crowd near the throne, have already stolen enough and legalized it, and don't need to do it anymore. Both of these messages are, of course, 100% wrong. Those in a tight crowd steal on the level of instinct. They cannot do otherwise. They compete with each other. Accordingly, if the food pyramid and its non-alternative top remain unchanged, one set of middle-caliber thieves will be replaced by exactly the same kind, only even less satiated, and if someone of a different formation penetrates, they will be devoured rapidly and imprisoned among the first. I have examples before my eyes. To your question about the emergence of peoples and civilizations, and this, by the way, kind of nicely ties into my yesterday's episode, I will only answer that, in my opinion, they all arise and develop within the framework of the divine plan. Much like an ordinary fruit orchard, planted by humans, grows, blooms, and ages, and dries up and renews itself, or perishes. What fruits the Lord will receive from peoples and civilizations is not given to us to know, until the second coming of Christ at the very least. Only the revelations of the holy ascetics contain hints of this. Hints that are not clear enough to everyone, including myself, to confidently draw any conclusions. By giving man free will, the Lord also gave all humanity the right and freedom to choose paths within this predetermined corridor along which human history moves, and which it cannot exit. Therefore, the history of Russia, its civilization and people, is not predetermined, but is created, always and now, by the hands of a huge number of people shaping their own destinies. And the collective fate of Russia can be very different, including very, in brackets, already short, and vice versa. Sincerely, Girkin. As you can see, Girkin is just as optimistic as our yesterday's main character. However, this whole mess, oh boy, it continues on. Because the glorious theater of conflict. It's not enough for these guys that the walls are crumbling internally. Now we have to play geopolitical poker with Erdogan, who, surprise, according to Girkin, wants Crimea like a cheap diamond-studded clock. But wait, Girkin pulls the curtain back on the real danger. It's not the obvious foes you see on the map, it's the guy who's supposed to be your ally. Kazakhstan. According to him, they're not just hostile, they're the source of drone strikes and logistical choke points. It's the war that eats itself and then finds new, equally uncomfortable neighbors to start punching. Girkin lays out the horrifying future map for Russia in yet another letter. Quote, questions and answers on potential future conflict involving Turkey and Azerbaijan. And this is for when he answers his own questions sent to him by mail. Question, if Turkey and Azerbaijan are drawn into the war, what will be the theater of military operations? Will it be the Caspian Sea or the Black Sea? What will happen to Abkhazia in this case? And what awaits the cities on the Black Sea coast? Sochi, Gelendzhik, Novorossiysk, and Krasnodar. I understand, and the response here is, I understand that for the next few weeks or months, Turkey will still not join the coalition of the willing. Although anything can happen at any moment, and sooner or later it will come to this. Definitely. It must be understood that the main prize for Turks is Crimea, on which they have their sights set. Before the main theater of military operations in the event of military clash with Turkey will be the Black Sea and Russia's Black Sea region. The Caspian direction will be secondary if Azerbaijan directly joins Turkey. If, however, it maintains a hostile neutrality, things will be relatively calm there, and we will only face difficulties of a different nature. However, we must remember that, in light of the rigidly hostile position adopted by Kazakhstan, and let me note you, the trucks on the border with Kazakhstan who can't get in and deliver humanitarian aid in brackets here, and the whole, stressful situation with the drones and Chinese parts, all this stuff. Yeah, they're still on the border. They're still not being let in. It's all going crazy there because Kazakhs, well, seems like they have actually finally picked a side. But carrying on with Girkin, quote, however, we must remember that in light of the rigidly hostile position adopted by Kazakhstan, the Kazakh direction also becomes extremely dangerous in the future. I am practically certain that the raids on Orenburg and Orsk, where our gas and oil industry facilities were recently hit, were carried out from the territory of Kazakhstan. There is no doubt about this. Given that Kazakhstan has joined the transport blockade of Russia, meaning that it does not allow sanctioned goods from China into our territory, Kazakhstan should not be dismissed as a possible passive or even active adversary during a foreign intervention on our territory. But, Girkin has been very active lately. See, this is where Girkin nearly chokes on his own bitterness, realizing that the national leader, so-called national leader, is playing kind grandfather for the history books, or so he wants to portray it for his own country. A humanitarian truce for journalists to visit encircled evil Nazis? Oh no! Well, according to Girkin at least. It's not mercy for him, it's a grotesque public relations stunt, a madness that has been, according to him, running since 2014, when, again, according to Girkin, because this man just cannot be, he cannot stop being utterly insane, where you are kinder to the enemy than to your own meat shields. I mean, no matter how you look at this isn't strategy at any point. There is no encirclement of 10,000 soldiers, it's just stupid. But, Girkin claims that this is just performance art designed to guarantee defeat. And, he, in his letter, demands to know when this 11-year-old psychiatric episode will finally end. But first, the message itself, because, you see, quote, this is from TASS, the official news agency, Russian Ministry of Defense announces readiness for ceasefire to grant journalists access to blocked areas. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced its readiness to seize hostilities for 5 to 6 hours to ensure access for foreign and Ukrainian journalists to the areas of Krasnoyarmeysk, that's how they call Pokrovsk, Dmitrov and Kupiansk, where large groupings of the armed forces of Ukraine are blocked. Obviously they're not, but it's besides the point here. Now, here is the Girkin's answer, because Girkin's final message for today, this one is Igor Girkin on Putin's decision to allow journalists to the encircled Ukrainian soldiers. Upon reading the message that our national leader called for a humanitarian truce so that journalists could travel to the encircled AFU soldiers in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, I was somewhat stunned. It's almost 4 years of war. Is it not enough to grasp a simple truth? We are fighting against Nazis and the people who have been duped by them. Trying to play the part of a kind grandfather for all former citizens of the Soviet Union in this situation is simply stupid. It is foolish and convinces the enemy of our weakness. Not like, we needed any convincing, but still, thank you for him admitting this. If we clearly made it understood that all crimes committed against Russia, against the Russian people, and against the other peoples of the Russian Federation would inevitably be followed by retribution, regardless of anything, as Israel, by the way, does. That's his brackets in there, not mine. The enemy would not be so brazen. They would not behave as insolently and with such impunity as they do now. They would not massively bomb Russian cities with missiles and drones, including targeting civilian objects. Coincidentally, that's exactly what Russia does, and we have no documented proof of Ukraine doing that. But, again, those are facts, and Igor Girkin is not a friend with such horrible drug as, facts and logic. But we continue to demonstrate a constant readiness for a so-called compromise, which no one will give us. As we demonstrate mercy to the enemy in situation where our own soldiers are paying with their lives for every such mercy. When will this end, finally? How much longer can one be kinder to the enemy than to one's own soldiers? This is madness, and this madness has lasted since 2014, since the time when our forces besieged the airport, and Motorola was the nickname for one of the leaders of the earlier revolt. I made an episode about him back then in 2014. And Motorola was practically kissing AFU soldiers, letting them go and allowing the garrison to be supplied. This too was not done by his personal desire, but by an order from above. And this disgrace has dragged on for 11 years. This is not how you win wars. This is how you only lose them. But I think this will be enough for Igor Girkin today. We have other important things to talk about. And here I'd like to again talk about, the most important Vatnik news. The persecution of Tatiana Montyan and the reaction of how all this is going in the Vatnik sphere, because they're having a nice little civil war on their own. Because you see, there is this channel called Hedgehog Squadron. And here we have him delivering a high RPM blast of pure unadulterated self-loathing. The message here, by the way, is very simple. Stop bickering, you narcissistic squabbling Z freaks. And he claims that every public argument is a victory parade for the enemy. You see, the Vatniks, they have lost the information war not because we're clever, but because their own side is too busy tearing itself apart over who gets the last can of stale rations. The Hedgehog reminds the Russian structure that they're currently their own worst enemy, and brings a lot of joy to my own ears and hopefully to yours as well, because, oh boy, this is exactly why I'm doing all this stuff. Quote, "While all of you, our own and your own, provoke public disputes among yourselves, you are working for the enemy, for their revel in victory as they look upon the disunity and disorganization of the Russian informational sphere. A victory on one of the fronts of this special military operation. On the information front, alas, a front so important in current realities." That's the Hedgehog Squadron, or Yezhovaya Eskadrilya. And they're just amazing. Because here's the gut punch, the moral abyss. We're talking about the persecution of Tatiana Montyan. And, the memory of poor Sergeant Moores, driven to suicide by constant TV slander from Solovyov. This is the carte blanche of power in Russia, a license to kill, politically and literally, for anyone with a better connection to the throne. The message is clear. Step out of line, organize anything independently, and you become a disposable target. The blue Z-Beard, the Z channel, warns the volunteers that the system views them all as disposable. These guys are playing some sort of charity worker while the collective system of the bureaucrats just sharpen their knives how to get them. This is exactly one of the reasons why the civil war, which I again mentioned previously, that's truly inevitable. Even the Zedvatniks themselves don't see what's up. But here is the big article by him. Quote, "On the persecution of Tatiana Montyan and selective justice." Quote, "The situation Tatiana finds herself in is far more global than the persecution of a single individual, for words that are so strongly pulled by the ears, that is literally strained, to fit a criminal case that one could do a blackflip on the spot. Unfortunately, it is obvious that this kind of injustice is now perceived by the public as routinely as Khrushchev-era panel buildings outside the window." Good old Khrushchev, because even Vatniks remember those, because, they're truly everywhere. Not in my village, though. Well, not where I can see them, thankfully, but they're on the other side, though. But we continue on, because this quote is truly amazing. The National Bolsheviks warned about the danger of such a perception, using the pressure on our own party as an example. Back in the mid-noughties, incidentally, the seriousness of our warnings was understood exclusively by the then liberals, who are now Ukrainian collaborators. There is, I wonder, they must be all like put in prison right now, where they can find these liberals which have not been put into jail. I don't even know, but again, these are vatniks with 2 brain cells. Who cares about logics anyway? There is plenty of fighting and internecine strife among them too, but unlike us, they still show remarkable consolidation. Patriots, neither on the right nor on the left, have anything close to this unity, and yet, unlike the foul liberists, none of us opposes the Russian state or Russian laws. Yeah, like that. Yeah, man, that's literally your problem. Literally. But carrying on. We often don't even clearly understand what rules to live by and what norms to observe. That is literally, is it permissible to respond to harassment? And should one take an active self-defense position in conditions where the legal framework is completely blurred? I'll put it simply. The situation is clearly taking on a character where administrative leverage or a person in the position of authority provides not just preferences in activity, but a carte blanche to eliminate any person without high-level patrons for personal reasons. And such cartes blanches utterly corrupt the people subordinate to the power groups. The persecution of Moors, Andrei Morozov, oh boy, I hope that, he's rotting in hell at this moment, who was driven to suicide by constant humiliation on television screens by Solovyov, sobered up no one. On the contrary, the lack of consequences only energized those who harassed him. In any case, nothing is known about an official or criminal investigation that established the reasons for his suicide. Nothing is known about an internal investigation at the TV channel regarding the individuals involved in the harassment. I mean, he's still waiting for something to happen, hoping that that's a real country. Well, I guess tough luck for him then. There is nothing, although the cases and identities are known to everyone. But they won't name them, obviously, because they're too afraid. Carrying on. The names are known to everyone who studied these cases and who has heard of this story. Fuck my mother, a Sergeant Morozov, known through Russia, shoots himself in the heart with a machine gun because of a conflict with a number of TV presenters. Is this not a reason to at least consider that something has gone wrong? And after Moors, the harassment predictably switched to Tatiana. All the same insults, lies, slander, and unsubstantiated accusations of theft. Some might say that Tatiana's style is not conducive to her defense. Yes, she gives the impression of a person who can stand up for herself. But while everyone in Telegram was routinely looking out at the escalating conflict with Tatiana, playing the collective Martin Niemöller, the stunning story with Ernest and Goodwin also routinely passed by. And for that, no one has essentially borne any responsibility. What am I getting at this? The world of victorious bureaucratization is such that when self-organized people start doing something useful for the fighting army, reaching a certain scale, the first questions they face are, who are you working for? Who's supervising you, sponsoring you? Upon receiving the answer that, yes, our biggest sponsor is the Russian people, the questioners start to widen their eyes, turning into a collective man in a case. A person paralyzed by fear of change, slammering the inarticulate, what if something goes wrong? And this is everywhere, this is frightening. Any independent activity frightens the system, in whose consciousness the year is still 1860, no later. And now I have to appeal to such non-integrated volunteers, engineers, and helpers of the front. Try listening to fragments of broadcasts on the well-known TV channel, that is Vladimir Solovyov and Rossiya 1, but, again, he doesn't use names because, well, vatniks tend to be extreme cowards. Try to listen to the fragments of broadcasts of the well-known TV channel where they poured dirt on Tatiana Nikolaevna and removed the specific focus on her and substitute another name. For example, your own. That's Blue Zedbeard, Siniy Zedboroda. But yeah, the Vatnik civil war is ongoing. And again, like I mentioned in my previous episode, this is very likely to turn into an actual civil war with the real Russian Federation and very active deaths of many people. But now, to wrap this segment up and move on to the next one, the main one of this episode, because we've spent enough time with Girkin and Vatniks today, the final last Vatnik, the Z foreign agent Roman Alyokhin, well, he ties in together Kazakhstan and what's happening next. See, he bravely accuses the government of the Russian Federation of self-sabotage. Quote, Kommersant writes that the mass inspections of thousands of trucks carrying imports at the borders between the Russian Federation and Kazakhstan are just a part of the government's plan to combat inaccurate customs declarations and increase the collection of import value-added tax on imports. Gosduma is starting to form a system for the complete traceability of goods, starting from declaration up to arrival at the point of sale. Meanwhile, we cannot buy walkie-talkies and repeaters for the front for the very same reason. I think the situation is similar with drones and other important components, including those for electronic warfare. The market price for walkie-talkies has now jumped from 5,800 rubles to 14,000, 15,000 rubles. That is, you could previously buy enough walkie-talkies for a battalion for 600,000 rubles. Now you can only buy enough for roughly a company. And this is not just the price that volunteers will pay, but essentially all citizens who help the front from their pensions, and this all comes at the cost of soldiers' lives and effectiveness at the front. And I can't even count anymore. How many times have we made the same mistake during this special military operation? When officials tighten the screws, seemingly with good intentions, but those who are doing the main work today, fighting at the front, suffer as a result. Well, I can tell you, Mr. Alyoshin, about 9. I mean, look at all the blockades, at least from the loud things. But the real part is the prices. Because now we're going to get down with the economy, because I haven't touched that in a while. However, before you get to that part, I'd like to all actually go and check out the Visegrad Dispatch podcast, since they just started out. And, well, you might have spoken with the author on Discord if you're on that one. Let's try to give him a hand. He's a great dude, and well, more power over there. We always support other people who just start out doing these things. It's a hard place to be. However, I also have to say a huge thank you to everyone who's supporting this show, because I wouldn't be here without you. You're literally paying my salary, and I'm massively thankful to everyone who's a patron of the show, or is a paid subscriber on Substack, or is also on the fourth wall. All of these options are nice and valid if you want to support the show. They're all slightly different, but, well, we over here at the Eastern Border would be happy if you pick any of them, if you could afford that. We have our first fairy tale reading by Evita. She's coming over right now, and there's going to be more. So we have some perks. We're going to do more interesting stuff in the future. Trying to. If you have any ideas, please let me know on my email, theeasternborder@gmail.com, or just, join our Discord. It's in the show description. It's on YouTube and the show notes, everywhere, basically. If you can't find it, just email me. We'll get to that. And also, well, you can just go to theeasternborder.lv and click the donate button there. Theeasternborder.lv. Yeah, Latvian site, so LV. And over there, there's also the pinned link to the Fourth Wall store, where you can buy our merch, Club of Angry Patriots merch. All the profits from that go to Ukraine. All that, it's amazing, and really, we wouldn't be here without you. And I massively depend on all you guys because, like I've mentioned previously, yeah, Acast doesn't really pay for ads that well. And also Spotify, if you listen to this on Spotify, yeah, we don't get anything from that. So I am fully 90% reliant on your Patreon. And I thank you for that. So if you'd like to support the show, if you like what you're hearing here, I would be very happy and thankful. All of us would. And I'm really horrible at marketing, so sorry that this is a bit awkward. It is always awkward for me. Oh, also, turns out that apparently I've won like some sort of Apple's best of selection of 2018, like so many years ago. No one A, told me, and B, informed me about this because, well, I don't use any Apple products at all because I used to be a phone repair person. But apparently I've actually been selected there a long time ago, which is weird because apparently that's on metadata. Just confusing. But yeah, very belated thank you to all of you guys who voted for me back there or something. I feel a bit confused. But yeah, please consider supporting the show. But the most important part is that you actually enjoy it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, well, listening to this, I only put thumbnails there unless it's a very special episode or something. Well then, please click the like and subscribe button. That would be much appreciated. But now let's get back to the more important part. Back to Earth, where the real suffering lives. See, forget missiles and purges. Let's talk about the grocery cart. The economic reality is stark in Russia. A 9% inflation hike, which is just the official data, and in reality it's closer to 30%. A 10% drop in rice, and an 8% plunge in milk consumption. People are switching to cheaper products and convenience stores are replacing supermarkets. The war isn't just killing soldiers, it's making the Russian public poorer, weaker, and hungrier, starting with the simplest, most essential things. Here are the numbers proving the great economic contraction. See, the growth in consumer activity in the Russian food market has been replaced by a decline. In January-September, the number of purchases grew only by 3.5% compared to 6% at the beginning of the year. Experts predict a further cooling of demand, noting that consumers are only in the initial stages of cutting back spending. There are some key consumer trends. There's decline in sales by volume. Consumers are buying significantly less of certain staples. 8% of milk, minus 8% that is, minus 9% of buckwheat, minus 10% rice. And there's an increase of average check. The average check has grown to 1,100 rubles. That is, 11 euros. That is plus 9%, but that's due to inflation, not increased purchasing volume. And of course, the Russians have started to truly do economy on even the most basic foodstuffs. Because buckwheat, oh boy, that's very cheap in Russia. There's of course impact on retail. There's a falling profitability, slowing revenue growth, and there's a ton of supplier contact problems. All this stuff is getting crazier because within Russia, analysts from the Sphere in October recorded a deterioration in the economy across all directions. Layoffs, tightening belts, bad indicators in many sectors, and the economy as a whole. At the same time, the expectations that they post is simply apocalyptic. The panic's almost gone, by the way. There's only the realization that everything is very bad and will get significantly worse. Metallurgy is dead, agriculture is near death, inflation is growing rapidly, and the slump has even reached the defense complex. The military-industrial complex, the official version of this is defense complex, but not like we buy into that stuff. And all this is being said not by some fifth column from abroad, not by some opposition people, but by the very real Putin loyalists inside Russia. Again, this is why I only use pro-Russian sources. Real Putin loyalists right now are screaming, a quote, "A super crisis is inevitable." Let's take a look at what happened to the Russian economy in October and what's expected of it. Spoilers, only the worst things possible. There are literally no optimists left in the Russian economic sphere, which is interesting because I've seen many more people being positive and optimistic about Russia's economy than I've actually seen them in Russia. Recession, at this point, is certainly unavoidable. And that's reported by Tsargrad TV, yes, the most fanatical Russian TV station, very ultra-Orthodox, Tsargrad TV with a host, Proniko. There are tons of risks here. First of all, and this comes from Proniko, the domestic economy is unlikely to avoid a recession in the upcoming 2026 year. At least, that's what the analysts from Center of Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting believe. They stated that the CMASF, that's the abbreviation of the Center Consolidated Leading Indicator for the onset of a recession in the Russian economy, has exceeded its critical threshold. That means the system has signaled a high probability of a decline in the physical volume of GDP in 2026. That was a quote from the Center's report, which Pronko quoted. But I'll finish this one up. The main factor increasing the risk is the rise in the level of interest rates in the economy. Until the end of 2025, GDP growth is likely to be supported by the overheating of domestic demand in anticipation of the value-added tax increase. However, in 2026, after the value-added tax hike, this factor will disappear, and the demand is likely to correct, analysts believe. They also believe that a drop in the GDP increases the risk of the onset and continuation of a systemic banking crisis. End quote from Pronko. And then we have more. See, negative trends are also currently being recorded in other situations. There is layoffs, downsizing, and meager pensions. People are being fired. In fact, that's already happening. And today, I saw an address from one of the enterprises related to the water utility businesses. People are being fired there, meaning the work week is being shortened. All auto manufacturers have switched to this mode. Today, very rare metals producers, VSMPO Avisma, announced that they are moving their administrative staff to a 4-day work week. Well, as it was said, it will affect the administrative part, but who it will really affect, well, we'll wait and see. I think that the poor workers, they're getting fired. Belts are indeed being tightened. For example, well, people of the older generation who still remember the World War II, they are used to tightening their belts. The ratio of the average pension to the average salary is just appalling. And seems that the situation will just get worse. Financial analyst Jan Art, who's also a friend of Dmitry Potapenko, another person who's also been on my show once, very long time ago, and who's also in the Libertarian Party of Russia, and who's also been invited often to this Tsargrad TV, well, he says that Russia is in a vicious cycle. By the way, he calls the whole war, a political situation, but he explains why everything will only get worse and that he himself is already preparing his employees for a salary reduction. Quote, "In the current political situation, the state simply cannot cut its expenses, and it turns out to be a vicious cycle. Yes, the economy is stopping, people will lose jobs and incomes because of the high interest rate. Yes, the rate is high because the tariffs are man-made, a component of inflation. Yes, it would be good to lower them, but lowering them in the current political situation is practically impossible. And this is the vicious cycle we're in. I have already stated to my own workers that this year is going to be a year of reductions, not of growth." End quote. Then we have recession in key industries. Entrepreneur and economist Pavel Semeyev on the same Tsargrad channel says that all sectors except the defense industry have been in recession for a long time, and this directly affects citizens. Quote, "It's been exactly about a year, maybe even more than a year. The real sector of the economy, if you don't count the military-industrial complex and related sectors, shows negative dynamics. This is definitely felt because it affects the dynamics of real wages in these sectors. It affects employment in these sectors. Key basic industries apart from the military-industrial complex and some transactional sectors have definitely been in this recession phase for a long time, meaning several quarters. And this is certainly affecting real incomes, real wages. Wages have stopped growing and will quite likely begin to decline." Sergei Serebyankov, director of Kirovsky Zavod, of a factory, massive military factory, says that indicators clearly signal that Russia is entering a severe financial crisis. And this is a guy from military-industrial complex, mind you, stating this one, again in an article. He notes that freight turnover has been falling for several months in a row since the beginning of the year, and the volume of electricity consumption by industrial enterprises, not by the population or utilities, is also constantly and sharply declining. And apparently, statistics on the turnover of monetary funds by transaction, which is data from the central bank, also showed a decline of about 8%, which is, well, my data says it's a very large decrease, but I really not that good at economy. I know the basic stuff, but I'm still learning. But I think that if anything is above 3 to 5% in economical data, then that's bad. That's very bad. Oh, and let's not even forget that central bank also stated that 13% of loans are, well, experiencing difficulties, problems, are deeply problematic. Yeah, 13% apparently is huge. A person on Discord told me that 6.7% was the rate on 2008 of unpayment of loans, and now Russia has 13%, which is double, and it's just insane. But this director of this military factory, Kirovsky Zavod, he warns that the country is, quote, slowly but surely crawling into a severe credit, severe economic, severe financial crisis. He also recalled the previous warning that everyone would feel the crisis by autumn. If Russian Railways, RZD, is trying to announce 4-day weeks, what can one say? Freight railcar construction has absolutely collapsed by gigantic percentages. Yes, the official railway service of Russia have to do 4-day work weeks because they simply cannot move on like they used to. Then we have Alexander Vinogradov, head of St. Petersburg Consumer Rights Protection Society. And he insists that the inflation reported by the central bank is understated, especially compared to the real price increases in stores. He stated that the price of chicken, and this is not on Tsargrad, this is on the communist station, like official opposition party, Radio Aurora, by the way, they're still on YouTube. He stated in an interview that the price of chicken, the main type of meat for Russians, has risen by 25% in the last 3 months. If how things are in your country, where you live now, well, let me know, please, because I'm just reporting price increases in percentages. And if you can give me some comments about how those things are in your country and how it was back in the COVID days, let me know. And this increase has been only in the last 3 months. Pork and beef are becoming elite products. Normal beef is now, and I quote him, from 1,000 rubles and goes up. Well, those are absolute numbers. 1,000 rubles, that's about 10 euros. I presume that's per kilogram, because otherwise that's how you buy it. But that's pretty expensive even by Latvian standards. He argues that private companies are suffocating from the lack of working capital and credit, which naturally leads to rising prices on shelves in all segments, especially utilities, which affects every citizen. Then, now we have the Z channel, Шестой день, Roman Romanov, and he reports on the impoverishment of the Russian population. He notes, like I mentioned in the facts earlier in this segment, that Russians have started actively saving money on food they cannot afford groceries as much as they did before. Retail chains now are in a panic, asking for help and compensation. They're feeling the recession and crisis at this point. The average profitability of major FMCG networks is nearing a historical minimum, putting them on the verge of unprofitability. The crisis is happening because the population is switching to a saving consumption model, cutting spending on food as rising prices deter demand and people refuse to buy expensive goods, choosing to save. The same channel later reported that Russians are reducing their consumption of dairy products because they have become too expensive and inaccessible. Consumption of butter, by the way, fell the fastest, by 11.2%, due to a record 40% price increase, with people substituting it with vegetable spreads. And let me note here that 80% of everything that's like margarine, basically, I can't imagine it's not butter, all those sort of replacement stuffs. Yeah, 80% of them, right? Palm oil, they found palm oil, and that was before the war. Russia is the largest importer of Indonesian palm oil, the technical one, which they use in foods. Glorious. Then we have the agricultural and industrial collapse. Another channel, macroeconomics for the people, who's run by, students and professors of Moscow School of Economics, which used to be run by my friend Igor Lipsits, who was on the show earlier this year. But now he's gone in Lithuania. But now even his previous colleagues, who turned to be a pro-Putin assholes, even they are complaining. Well, they in this channel write about the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Trade, and about their statement that the agricultural machinery industry is facing a perfect storm. The main reason for the sector's decline is, they posted beautifully, macroeconomics and the high key interest rate. Apparently, for the second year, the market is falling, with the high key rate making it impossible to attract money for equipment purchases. Shipments from domestic factories fell by a colossal 40%. We like the 40% mark in the first 9 months of 2025. The same channel notes that Russia has become a net food importer for the first time ever. In January-July 2025, for the first time in many, many, many years, basically since the early 90s, it's insane, Russia became a net food importer. Agri-export is declining while import is rising, with a $3.8 billion excess in favor of import. Low prices for agricultural crops globally and in Russia, combined with the state regulation, export duties and quotas, they don't promote domestic production. Sown areas in Russia are shrinking. Guess what? Because all the workers are, dead in the war, and now we have ethnic conflicts with migrants too. Just amazing. In 2025, the sown areas decreased by 3 million hectares compared to the 2022 maximum. And apparently, the load on agricultural machinery is quote-unquote crazy. We have farms who report not having updated any equipment for 3 years, with a load of over 1,600 hectares per combined harvester, compared to 300 to 400 hectares considered high in Europe. Yeah, in Europe, you have to, when you have a load for a combined harvester of 300 to 400 hectares, that's high. In Russia, they now have to do this for 1,600 hectares. And to my American people, because I actually didn't know this is an American system. I thought everyone used hectares. But, 400 hectares is like about close to 1,000 acres. Close, 988 or so. Equivalently, 1,600 hectares, that's about 4,000 acres. Well, again, slightly less, 3,800 something. Like I said, 400 hectares is about close to 1,000. But, I don't know how that's in the United States, but numbers are quite shocking, to be honest. And we're not done. I really want to say, like in these old commercials, but wait, there's more. It is a bit of a shame that History of Everything podcast, he's taken the line, but wait, it gets worse. Because, oh man, I need the t-shirt. I actually really need to collaborate with him as well. Because, oh boy, it definitely does get worse. You see, not only the load is insane for these combine harvesters, but for the agricultural goods, resource costs for these farmers have risen by 100% to 260% from 2012 to 2025, while the price of wheat has only grown by 66%. Then we have the channel Stalingrad, which is also another channel dedicated to economy, and they, on their YouTube video, noted that there is a severe crisis in metallurgy, the worst crisis since the 90s. Russian metallurgical plants have begun layoffs due to a collapse in demand and production. The wave of forced layoffs and transfers to a shortened work week has reached Russian metallurgy, one of the key non-commodity sectors accounting for almost 20% of all industrial production. And, due to falling demand, expensive loans, and worsening financial indicators, almost all metallurgical plants in the Russian Federation have started reducing staff. The Z channel Verum Regnum reports that Uralvagon Zavod is moving part of its employees to a 4-day work week, specifically those in the civil segment. Other major machine-building enterprises have also announced a shortened work week. The reason in all cases was not external sanctions, but the fall in demand for products due to the cooling of the economy carried out by the Central Bank of the Russian Federation. And then we have tax hikes. See, the State Duma supported the decision by Putin and Silvanov to raise value-added tax in Russia. That's basically kind of a sales tax, but not really for American people. In Russia to 22% in the first reading. Then we had even more Z channels, just like this previously mentioned Shestoy Den Roman Romanov, and he notes that means that literally everything in the country will become even more expensive. The State Duma also approved in the first reading a significant tightening of conditions for small businesses. The income limit for the simplified tax system is reduced from 60 to 10 million rubles. Entrepreneurs exceeding this threshold will be required to pay the full value-added tax. Excise duties on alcohol and tobacco products will rise above the inflation rate. Tax benefits for the sale of property are cancelled. For the IT sector, the insurance contribution tariff is increased from 7.6% to 15%, and tax authorities will receive expanded powers, including the right to inspect company premises at will. Now, isn't just that amazing? How great for business? And then, just as I made the episode yesterday about the potential of civil war, again, we also have a civil collapse. See, the Accounts Chamber of the Russian Federation, for the first time ever, admitted the possibility of a recession in the economy. This chamber of the Russian Federation, an official institution, predicts that the rise in tariffs and the tightening of the central bank's policy will lead to a decline in GDP as early as 2026. In its conclusion on the draft federal budget for 26 to 28, the Accounts Chamber explicitly stated that, quote, an increase in regulated tariffs may force the central bank to tighten monetary policy, which will lead to a decrease in business activity and a reduction in GDP. Basically, the situation in October is no better than in September. It's massively worse, and people are just stating that, don't expect collapse soon. No, you could probably expect collapse in 2026. I mentioned this, I think, last year when someone asked me when the whole thing will end. Yeah, it doesn't actually matter how much Russia advances. Like, even if they take over all of Ukraine suddenly, it would be massively tragic for Ukrainians. It would be horrible. But if you look at it from a cynical side, that economy is so screwed that it's going to collapse, and then we have the incoming civil war because no one canceled that either. See, this is just crazy because day after day, all the time that I'm writing this, which is why I released this the next day after the previous episode, although this was the planned one, because I did not expect an authority to talk about the civil war so openly, but after all this stuff, right, it just fits in. It fits in perfectly because I was shocked already that all these people on the official Vatnik program, right, they're just talking about this openly because, like, the panic is practically gone. And there's a realization that everything, well, is fucked and will get fucked only more. But for now, as you can see, everything is just going according to their plan. And, I remind you, All this stuff is written by the Z supporters themselves and the analysts remaining inside Russia, loyal to the Putin regime or working for it. It just keeps getting better and better, to be honest. Just kind of crazy. But to wrap this whole thing up, well, there's the usual utter insanity segment, because, you know, comrades, we have now at this point snorted the last lines of reality and chased them with a lukewarm glass of state-sponsored Kool-Aid. The propaganda trip with a bunch of economical sadness is almost over. The psychic bruises should be now setting in, and you can practically hear the iron fist closing around the Russian people. But you know what? There's one last punch left, and this one's left for the kids. Isn't that just crazy? But you see, the beast is always hungry. And this week, the beast of Russia decided that the pure, unadulterated sound of a simple school bell, that glorious Pavlovian ding that signals for the brief, shining moment of freedom between the math class of despair and, well, history lecture, which, as I know now, is often full of lies, sadly, well, apparently that little ding was just too damn free for Russia these days. All school bells will be replaced with patriotic melodies this month in November. That was declared by the Ministry of Education in the Russian Federation. The selection of songs that are going to be replaced includes Mother Russia, My Brothers, Sweet Russia, We Are United, Invincible, and The Flag of My State. The ministry assures that the melodies will help schoolchildren discuss questions of commonality and patriotism during recess. Has any one of you actually discussed patriotism and commonality in your recess at school? Don't think so, no. Of course, all these songs, like lyrics for We Are United, Invincible, and similar songs like the modern popular one, When We Are United, We Are Invincible, the sequel to that one, obviously, they contain overtly aggressive militaristic lines, like «Врагов ждет горькая расплата за слезы наших матерей». That's a bitter reckoning awaits the enemies for the tears of our mothers. Yeah, well, just great. Apparently, the soothing sound of a child's recess must now be replaced with a musical equivalent of a mandatory bayonet drill, featuring lyrics that promise bitter reckoning to unseen enemies, because nothing encourages a productive school day like the promise of future blood vengeance. I would make some 40k joke, but it's just too sad and too miserable to have even actually consider this stuff. A lot of those other songs are not much better. They're not just rewriting the textbooks, folks. It's not just about the lessons which the guy from yesterday's episode wants to implement. It's even about the whole soundtrack of childhood itself that's horrible now. This is just stupid. This whole thing going on these 2 days that I'm doing this whole work, well, this has been so unbelievably, staggeringly fucking just concentrated and so perfectly Putin's Russia, then you might think that, I don't know, my personal hero, Hunter S. Thompson himself, penned a press release while strapped into a centrifuge and force-fed diluted state vodka or something. Or Spider Jerusalem, who enjoyed his Ebola cola or whatever. They're giving me the material for pure gonzo themselves, and I just can't stop working. This is just crazy. But for all those kids in Russia, well, what can I say? Take a deep breath now, brace yourself. Because the new sound of recess, the government-approved motivational jingle to get the little Vanya and Svetlana back to their desks, well, it's an open bloody promise of more war delivered on a tinny speaker. Glorious. This, my good dear comrades, is how the circus ends. Not with a bang, with a mandated tiny little jingle. Because bitter reckoning, obviously, in school grounds, is going to lead only to good, very positive results for children's development. Amazeballs. But yeah, that's it for today. До свидания, товарищ. Please consider supporting my show on Patreon. Check out Visegrad Dispatch. And remember, happiness is mandatory.